Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I have quite a lot of paranormal experiences, so much so that some of my friends call me a demon magnet. Some of my experiences include being chased out of an abandoned mansion by a banshee poltergeist, witnessing a shadow person that was related to the mansion incident but happened a year later, seeing what I can only describe as a modern Wendigo in the northern Utah mountains, catching the ghost of an innkeeper at a Mormon fort on camera and recording, having my car window pounded on and car engine sabotaged by an unknown, unseen entity while car camping with some friends, seeing tons of UFOs. For context, I get recurring sleep paralysis. I've gotten sleep paralysis since I was younger, but it didn't get bad till I turned 15. Since then I get it at least once a week or more, sometimes multiple times a night. All of the experiences above happened with other people, so I know it wasn't sleep paralysis-based hallucinations or dreams. However, I do believe that there are entities, from this realm or others, that feed on fear, and specifically target people in or with sleep paralysis. This is based entirely on personal experience, as some of the things I've seen were far too intelligent, personal to be random dreams. I'll greentext my Wendigo story since it's probably the shortest. But I can do any of them if people want to hear them. Be me in summer 2019. Some friends of mine want to go camping in the Uintas. Friend of mine, who I'll call Ethan, says he knows a good spot pretty close to parking. Something like a quarter mile from the parking to the camping spot. Me and my other friend, who I'll call Pete, pack a ton of shit, since we figure it's going to be an easy walk. Get to the camping area. Turns out the parking area is about 1.5 miles from the campsite. So we decide we're gonna make multiple trips to make things easier on ourselves, since we've got nothing but time. Map is a general sketch of the area we were in, a river and some ponds on one side, with a birch grove on the far bank, and then a small pond and a lot of forested area on the other side. We make it to the campsite and start setting up our stuff. Pete and Ethan decide to just set the tent on the ground, but not actually set it up. I warn them that it's supposed to rain and we should probably set it up all the way, but they insist it will be fine. Start hiking back down to the cars. About halfway there it starts to drizzle. Pete and Ethan decide to keep going, so I follow them. About 3/4 of the way to the car, Ethan hits me on the shoulder and points across the ponds to the birch grove and says, "Do you see that?" Look at where he's pointing and see something very tall, very skinny, with skin as pale as the birch bark around it standing slightly to the side of a tree. Its head is topped by what I can only describe as pale white antlers or branches. We tell Pete about it, but he can't see it. It's weird, but we decide it can't be anything too strange because Pete is completely oblivious to it. Make it to the car, grab some of our stuff and start the trip back. About halfway back Pete stops dead in his tracks and says,
"Holy fuck, wait, is that the thing you guys were talking about?"
And points. See the same creature as before, this time a bit closer to the shore of the pond, but still standing in the grove of birches. Still a little freaked out, but we all took paid time off for this camping trip and don't want to miss out. Plus, I have a 9mm handgun, and Pete and Ethan both have big ass knives, so we figure we'll be alright. Make a few more trips to the car and back. See the creature every time, moving between trees in the birch grove. Finally set up camp. The tent is completely waterlogged. Tell Pete and Ethan, "I told you so." Start cooking the food we brought and drinking. Eventually just forget about the creepy figure and get into the mood. Once midnight hits we decide to turn in. There is a bit of a dry area in the corner of our big 12-man tent, so we crowd ourselves into it. My hand is in a puddle of water the whole time, so I have trouble sleeping. Ethan and Pete are hammered and fall asleep right away. I always have a hard time falling asleep, so I'm up for a while. Around 1 a.m. I start to hear what sounds like deer walking near our camp. We're in the middle of the mountains in Utah, so it's not that strange to see deer, elk, or even moose. Ignore it and try to fall asleep. As time goes on it gets louder and louder, and I hear more and more footsteps. Pete and Ethan are still out cold. About 20 minutes after I first hear it, it sounds like there is a stampede of deer outside. Say fuck it, grab my gun, and hop out of the tent. The second my feet hit the ground outside, the footsteps stop. Scan the camp and nearby trees, don't see anything. So, I sat down next to the embers of the campfire and took another drink of whatever Pete had left out by the fire. Get back in the tent and eventually manage to fall asleep. The next day tell Pete and Ethan about the footsteps. They're a little spooked, but we have some more friends meeting us at the camp that day, so we decide to stay. When our bigger friend group gets there, we decide to go check out the grove of birches. We don't see anything that could have been mistaken for the creature. No fallen trees, no weird modern art, no homeless meth addicts standing on each other's shoulders. And these trees are tall. Over 12 feet. And the creature, whatever it was as tall as the tallest trees in the grove. Freaked out. But whatever it was didn't seem to want to harm us, so we stay another 3 nights and don't see or hear anything else weird. Anticlimactic, I know, but it was one of the weirdest experiences I have had, and there were 2 other people there to see it. I'm not sure what to call it except a Wendigo, but more in the sense of the modern internet meme and not the northern native cannibal spirit. Be me in late summer 2020. Car camping on the shore of Utah Lake. Me, my buddy, and his girlfriend. In before third wheel. Have a blast driving on the dirt roads around the lake in my buddy's girlfriend's Jeep. Get wasted and hang out around a fire till around 1 or 2 a.m. Decide it's time to sleep, we all crowd into the back of the Jeep. I don't know if you guys have ever been car camping, but the windows get really foggy. Wake up to extremely loud, violent pounding on the windows of the car. At first thought it might have been rangers. Look around. Can't see shit because of the fog. Grab my handgun, open the door and say, "Who the fuck is there?" No response, so I got out of the car and look around. Don't see a soul. No footprints besides the ones I just made in the mud. My buddy woke up too and was freaked out. His girlfriend slept like a rock through the whole thing. Get back into the car and fall asleep. We wake up the next morning, light a fire, fuck around, and make breakfast. Eventually we pack our shit and decide it's time to leave. Friend's girlfriend goes to start the car and it won't start. We pop the hood, and there are a ton of oil-soaked rags jammed in random parts of the engine and dry sticks thrown all over everything. We clean it all out and throw it away. Car starts perfectly fine. Now, could it have been a crazy meth head trying to fuck with us? I suppose so, but it's hard for me to believe even the weirdest meth-addicted fucker could get out of there faster than I hopped out of the car and leave no footprints behind. The sabotage seemed kind of like someone or something that had seen a car, but had no idea how they work. Other friends have had their windows knocked on by things they never catch a glimpse of in that area too. When I was younger, I distinctly remember a dream that led into sleep paralysis that is still stuck in my mind to this day. I had to be 7 or 8 at the time. Be asleep. Be dreaming that me and my dad are hiking on the side of a mountain. Suddenly there are 2 half-frog half-men chasing us up the trail. My dad says, "Fuck this," and jumps off the mountain. I decide to follow him. Fall slowly to the ground. When I hit the ground in my dream, I wake up and feel myself fall into bed. Completely paralyzed. Bright light turns on above my head. I am on an operating table surrounded by doctors with mutilated, bloody faces. They start to operate on me. I try to scream but I can't. Wake up to my mom shaking me. Apparently she heard me screaming and came into my room, and when she tried to wake me up I kicked her a few times before I finally snapped out of it. It doesn't sound too scary, but as a 7-year-old it fucked me up for weeks. This took me approximately 20 hours in paint to properly circle whatever this thing was. Greentext for background. Be me in 2010, in my early teens. Dad, sister and I took a trip to Utah to visit my cousins. Dad takes me, my sister, my older cousin and my younger cousin to Camp Floyd, which is an old Mormon camp, fort west of Utah Lake. There is an inn, a few houses, a church, a graveyard, and the remains of the old fort as well as a visitor center. It's about 8 a.m. on a cloudy day, and besides the receptionist, we are the only people around. My dad, younger cousin, and sister insist that they want to go look at the church and the fort. Me and my cousin want to look at the inn and graveyard because we heard they're haunted. Split up. Me and my cousin go into the inn and the rest go to the church. We're walking through the inn. I'm recording audio with my old sliding keyboard style phone, and my cousin is recording shitty video with his flip phone. The inn feels weird, but so do most places when you're a kid and think they're haunted. We go throughout the inn and don't see or hear anything too weird, so we write it off as a false haunting and start heading to meet up with the rest of our family. Before we leave, Dad takes a photo of the inn to show to people. We drove home and my cousin and I decided to listen to the recording and watch the video. Video doesn't show shit. Audio lasts a little while without anything weird happening, but about halfway through my cousin asks me, "Are you still recording?" We then hear a deep, gruff, but distant voice ask, "Why are you recording me?" We freak out and show my dad. Tour guide insisted she was the only one there when we first got there, and my dad insisted he was in the church the whole time. Dad looks at the bottom window of the inn in one of the pictures and sees this. Whatever it is in the window. Now, it doesn't look like much and is shitty quality. Sorry if that's disappointing. It was taken on a camera phone in 2010, and then zoomed in on and cropped. However, I have no idea what that weird mass in the top of the window is. My cousin and I did a very thorough search of the house and there was nothing that could be mistaken for this in the room. My dad insists it looks like an angry old man with a beard in a suit jacket, but I think it just looks like a weird phantasmal blob. Either way, it definitely wasn't anything inside the inn, or a reflection, as we were standing very far away from the inn, in the center, and this was the bottom left window. Wouldn't make any skeptics stutter, but at the time it was weird as fuck and still can't figure out what happened. I've been back to the inn in recent years and that room is still barren of anything that could have looked like this thing.
Please tell the mansion story, bro. That, dear, story was eerie.
Alright. This is gonna take forever to greentext and probably be multiple parts, but it's genuinely one of the weirdest sets of experiences I've ever heard in my life, and me and the people that experienced both instances are still baffled. Be me in my late teen years. I think I must have been 17 at the time. Had moved away from my hometown in Southern California 2 years ago to a town about 30 minutes down the highway, but most of my friends were still in my hometown. I would often take drives on Friday nights to go hang out with them. We're hanging out at one friend's house. I'll call her Sarah. It was me, my friends Kevin and Oliver, Sarah, and a hot chick that I'll call Stacy. Not their real names for obvious reasons. Sarah lives in a really rich neighborhood near the wine vineyards of the town. House has 6 or 7 bedrooms, 3 stories, a pool in the backyard, the works. Pretty close to a reservation and a lot of open land and hiking trails in some smaller foothills that eventually lead up to some mountains that get snow in the winter. Sarah starts telling us a rumor she heard about this abandoned mansion near her house being haunted. Now, this mansion is huge. It has 3 stories, over 12 rooms, a huge garage, a swimming pool and jacuzzi, a basement, a huge driveway and giant barn on the property, etc. It was on what had to be at least 10 acres of land, if not more. It was also a few miles away from any real paved roads, and the only road that led to it was a fenced-off dirt road. You could get to the house by parking in a nearby suburb, following one of its running paths, that's about half a mile long to a small trail, and then walking a mile and a halfish to the property, hopping the fence, and hiking up a bit of a hill. We go during the day, the place is cool as fuck, tons of high school students and druggies hang out and throw parties there. There's an old Santa Claus statue with a knife duct taped to its hand in the living room, a bunch of broken TVs and old computer parts, and tons of graffiti on the walls. Of course there's a few pentagrams and other edgy shit drawn on the floor in chicken blood or red paint too. We hung out for a bit, explored the house and property, went into the barn, and decided to head home. We hang out till dark and decide to go back. It's about 9 p.m., it was summer so the sun had just set. We make the hike to the house and get onto the property. The place feels weird. Cliché, I know, but I can't describe it any other way. Everyone's a little spooked. Nobody wants to go in the house. But, there's a cute girl there and I want to impress her. So I go in the house with nothing but an old Zippo with an anarchy symbol on it I liked to carry around because I was an edgy dumbass. Go into the house, explore the whole thing by myself. Surprisingly not that creepy. Nothing weird happens. Get out of the house and decide to fuck around on the property for a bit longer. Stacy was not impressed, but Sarah was all over me that night. Too bad she was a butterface and I wasn't feeling it. We decide to head back to our cars and start making our way there. We hop the fence off the property and slow down a bit, since we are not technically trespassing anymore. We get onto the trail and Sarah insists on holding my hand. We hike about a half a mile and Sarah looks behind us, squeezes my hand, and says,
"Do you see that thing behind us?"
Everyone turns around and we see a small, feminine-looking silhouette about a half mile behind us. It's a little strange, but we're in a nice neighborhood so some white chick on a night hike wouldn't be that strange. We keep walking as if nothing is happening. The silhouette stays just far enough behind us to stay out of sight the whole time. Get another half mile back to our cars, only about a mile to go. Sarah turns around again and whispers,
"What the fuck?"
The silhouette is gliding or like skipping, blinking, across the ground towards us. It gets within proper viewing range and we can see it's completely black, like a dark shadow. Suddenly it stops. It then starts to shudder and shake and lets out the loudest, most high-pitched, ear-piercing scream I have ever heard. We freak the fuck out and book it back to the car. We floor it back to Sarah's house. We smoke a little bit and drink some booze to help us calm down. Nobody wants to talk about it the rest of the night. At around 1 a.m. I feel sober enough to head home. The whole time I'm driving home I feel as if something is following me. I honestly have no idea what it was. But I can only describe it as a banshee or poltergeist. Whatever the case, it was weird as fuck. Now this event is, in my belief, connected to another event where me, my cousin, and an unrelated friend witnessed a shadow person that I'll greentext here soon. Now for the shadow person story. Me, a year later. Had turned 18 and graduated from high school a few months earlier. Cousin came out from Utah to visit me and our mutual friend, who I'll call Aaron. We go for a hike in my hometown, on a trail pretty close to the abandoned mansion from last time. Maybe a mile or two away at most the whole time. After the hike we decided to go see a movie. I think it was Shrek 3? The first Ant-Man? Something like that. We start heading back to my place. We decided to stop at Taco Bell. I just realized I have to make at least 2 drawings to explain this better. This is gonna take longer than I thought. Stop on a street corner by my old high school near Aaron's house. There's a field and a horse pasture on one side of the road, and the other side has a housing development with these big 10 feet tall brick walls. Aside from that, the development was mostly empty. Some pallets of bricks and pipes. We're chilling, munching on tacos when out of nowhere my cousin hits my shoulder and says,
"Bro, do you see that thing?"
and points at the corner of the brick wall. There is a strange darkness peeking around the corner, and two smaller blobs of darkness, one on top of the wall and one, gripping the corner. It looks like a head and two hands, but completely devoid of light or color. For some reason, we don't feel scared or threatened at all, just as if something is observing us. Pick related, it's a basic map. Aaron can't see it, but he feels the feeling. We keep eating tacos and fucking around until Aaron says,
"Oh shit, I see it."
We look back. This time the head and both the hands are peeking over the top of the wall. We decided that's pretty strange, and since all three of us now see it, some of us twice, we decide to dip. Drop Aaron off at his house. My cousin is staying with me, so we drive home. Of course, the whole time, that feeling of being watched never leaves. Get home, go inside. I have 2 dogs, both of which love my cousin and have seen him a million times. One of the dogs always sleeps in my room with me. That dog freaks the fuck out as soon as we get home, keeps growling at us, refuses to come near us. We hang out in my room for a little bit and then start trying to fall asleep. We hear footsteps in the backyard and what sounds like very faint whispers. Still have that feeling of being watched, or almost, played with. Toyed with? Now, I lived on an acre of land, so the backyard was fairly big, but we looked out the window and couldn't see shit. It's weird, but we can't see anything, so we do our best to fall asleep. Wake up on and off, the whispers and footsteps have yet to stop. Finally, when the sun comes up, they stop. We leave my room to get breakfast, and both dogs love me and my cousin again and are completely normal. We decide to go check out the housing development with Aaron. Hop the gate and check it out. There is nothing that we could have mistaken for what we saw, and no way we could have confused anything there with the being. Nothing near the wall that someone could have stood on to peek above it. Like I said, this thing didn't feel malicious, just otherworldly and strange. It didn't seem to want to harm us, it was more like it was just watching us. Pick related is a very bad sketch of how this thing was looking at us.
I got a good one. The Shilo Inn in downtown Salt Lake City. Local father was a cult leader who believed he was Jesus Christ. He self-ended as the FBI was closing in on him for wire fraud. A few days later, his wife threw all of their 6 children from the balcony of her hotel room in front of a huge crowd of horrified onlookers. The crowd pleaded and begged her to stop. Several of the children fought her. She threw them over the balcony one by one. After she had thrown all them to their death, the crowd screamed obscenities at her and urged her to jump. The murders occurred in 1978, and it was just last year that the hotel started to rent the room they stayed at again. Many visitors have reported the hotel being haunted and having an extremely dark energy in the hotel. One of the daughters managed to survive, but I don't know what happened to her or what condition she is in. Pick is of the victims.
We used to live by this house. We called it the Demon House. Everyone and their grandmother knew these people did some dark shit there. Our neighbors all ignored it, however. Which was kind surprising, since they were all Mormons. We thought they would at least get involved, but by what I've heard as I've gotten older is they probably encouraged that shit. Anyways, once on Halloween I took my little brother, Ted, out to go door to door for some candy. We got to the Demon House, and Ted for some reason wanted to knock on the door. I caved and went up, mainly because of my curiosity on what these weirdos looked like. We walked up their uncut lawn, the only fucking thing the Mormons got onto them about, and I knocked on the door. We waited a minute before some skinny dude who looked like a literal fucking corpse opened the door and screamed, "We don't got no candy," before slamming the door in our face. The quick waft that came from the house smelled like something crawled up in there and died. Ted and I left and continued going door to door. A year later, they left, and the house was unoccupied for a while. A friend and I went there twice to sneak around and check it out, but the place scared us so bad we just decided never to go back. This was up in Davis County. It wasn't the Satan house though. That's a different place in Davis County.
I'll contribute. I spent a few years, homeless, camping outside of small towns before I got a car and moving around a bunch after I got one. Lots of little incidents. You'll have to decide what is paranormal. Background. B 2010 or something. BF working wilderness therapy. 1 week shifts where I'm alone. Have a car at this point. In Utah. Mostly camping outside of the little town of Gunlock and driving to St. George for supplies and library books. Gunlock is a tiny-ass little town, where the trees are filled with ravens. Usually cycle between 3 camps between this town and the reservation. 3 minor incidents from these camps: sundown maybe 10 p.m. in winter. Got back from town late and figured fuck setting up a tent. Make a nest in the back seat of the car. Lay out a 0-degree sleeping bag. Ah yes, warmth. Sit in driver's seat reading for a while by the headlamp light. Finally crawl in back to go to sleep. Falling asleep. Someone climbing chain link fence. MP3. No camp really well by now. On the telephone line access road. Jack shit for miles in all directions. Fucking this. X. Go to sleep. Not so much paranormal, well, unless you are the sort that doesn't believe in coincidences. New batch of library books. Yeah, motherfucking books. Reading V for Vendetta. Turning and turning in the widening gyre. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Sweet quote. Reading American Gods the next day. Same quote. Take a break from American Gods. Flip through Joseph Campbell Power of Myth. Turning and turning. Okay, nope. Collect firewood instead of reading for the rest of the day. Been camping in these camps for a while now. Used to camping alone at this point, so nothing really phases me. At a campsite near the river. Decide to go hiking up Small Slot Canyon. Nice day, never been down this canyon. Little bird flying ahead. Decide to follow that little bastard. Lose it a few times but it never leaves the canyon. Finding thick strands of black hair and picking them up. Horsehair? It pauses in tree above a small pile of sand. Flies away. Lots of thick black hair in sand. Cool. Collect it. Sunsets. I've made a terrible mistake. Spooked. Fucking terrified. No reason. Just scared. Drive 50 miles to a different camp. Sleep. Next morning drive back and put hair back. Don't camp there again alone ever. Another small quirky incident I just remembered. Driving with BF in the middle of fucking nowhere, Washington. Trying to find a place to pull off for the night. Winter, snow on the road. New moon, can't see shit outside of headlights. Something rushes out of the woods and runs alongside the car. What the actual fuck? We both see something bulky, maybe 3 feet tall at the shoulder. Pure white running on 4 legs with a long thick neck and a head like a dog. It falls behind. Look at each other. Sleep in the car that night. I have one more story from these camps. Gonna forego the Greentext. Quick refresher. It is 2010 and I'm homeless, but it is more car camping in the middle of nowhere than wandering around the city. I go into the city for books or whatever. Boyfriend working wilderness therapy, so for 1 or 2 weeks I'm on my own. It is winter, but winter in Utah is relative. At this point I've gotten my car stuck in camp twice. I'll pick a camp and then it will rain and the sand I drove in on becomes a trap. I usually just wait until morning when the frost makes everything a little more solid and escape then. It is the night before I need to go pick my BF up in a town 50 miles away. I picked the campsite on the telephone line access road. Just near the road is almost paved with lots of little rocks. Further back is sand where I've been stuck before. I drive further back because I don't want someone to see my car and hassle me. I make my nest in the back seat and go to sleep. A few hours later I woke up to the sound of rain on the car roof. Fuck. I do not want to get stuck again. I scramble into the driver's seat and move the car closer to the main road and go back to sleep. The next morning I wake up and crawl back into the driver's seat. I don't even bother putting away the sleeping bags that make my nest. I'll be gaining lots of altitude and I'll want the sleeping bags for warmth while I wait for the BF. Driving along and things seem slightly weird, but don't question it too much. I realize I'm still in my fleece pants, which is strange because the urge to change into proper clothes to drive is really strong in case I get pulled over. Whatever, I was in a hurry to get out of Camp 1, don't question it too much. At some point I pull into a truck stop and decide to take a shower. At this point I've noticed that it was almost like the physics of how things moved was slightly off. Standing in the steamed-up shower I really start to suspect that I'm dreaming. I wipe a mirror clean and check my eyes. In dreams I don't look like I do IRL, and even if the resemblance is close it never replicates an angry patch of veins in one eye. Angry patch of veins is there. I look exactly like I did when I went to sleep. Well, shit. Still not satisfied. I remember that I'd fallen asleep to the sound of rainfall on my car roof. If I close my eyes and hear it, I'm dreaming. I have difficulty closing my eyes at first, like I can't remember how. Finally, close them. Really aware of everything. Water and towel on my skin. Smell of steam. And then in the distance the faint sound of rainfall slowly getting louder and louder. The sound of rain on the car roof. I open my eyes and I'm in my car. There is no truck stop on the route I take to pick up the BF. That place doesn't exist. I had been dreaming. Fuck. Everything. I don't know if this is related at all, but the story wouldn't be complete without this detail. In the morning I crawled into the driver's seat and then opened the door to get out to piss. In the wet sand and pebbles is a footprint. It is too distorted from the rain to tell if it is my own. There is a line of footprints leading from my car to a set of fresh tire tracks from the main road deeper into the desert. I remember something about myself then. Very rarely, that I know of, I will wake up and interact with people, move things and hold conversations and remember nothing in the morning. At some point during the night someone had driven in. Either they had paused along their way to come and peer into my car, or in my sleep I had wandered to them, perhaps spoken to them and convinced them to move on. I do not know which scenario unsettles me out most.
Yeah, I'll greentext mine, was about 5 years ago or so. In Utah. Live in fucking Mormon suburbia. Neighborhood is built literally winding up a mountain, so if you look up at one side of the neighborhood, mountains tower over everything. Walking the dog one night, about 10 p.m. Look up at the mountains. What the fuck is that? Dude, this is weird as fuck. Call my girlfriend over. There are about 6 light orbs coming out one by one from the side of the mountain, really high up. They are kind of scattered, moving slowly over the neighborhood. Eventually, they gather up extremely close and pick up speed. Watch them until I can't see them anymore. I honestly could not and still cannot make sense of it. Military doesn't make sense because of where it happened, they were flares, and I haven't heard or read about anything natural that looks like that and travels in packs like geese. Really weird and cool and glad I saw it.
I enjoy spooky road stories as I used to be a truck driver and just got back into it, and the thought of some roads being spooky is fun. So hopefully this thread makes it. But since I am starting it, I am going to greentext a story that happened to me the other night. I am not the best at greentext, so sorry in advance. Be me, trucking again cuz high school dropout. Be on 70 West in Utah. Bad snow. Driving slow as fuck cuz load isn't worth my life. Kicking it at around 20. Car spins out right behind me. JPEG. Now I'm the only one on the road. Spoops. See black Mustang on the side of the road facing the road, lights off. Sucks to be her. Slow down a bit more cuz snow is getting worse. Pass something called Ghost Rock viewing area. Ghost Rock. Change the song I'm listening to and check the time. Around 11:30 p.m. Look back at the road and see something standing on the left shoulder, I think. Slow down even more in case a person and heroes with my truck. Creep by it and realize it's a man. He's looking at me. We lock eyes. He's smiling. That 1 second feels like an eternity. Pass him and check my mirror real quick to make sure I don't run him over. Man gone. WTF, fuck Utah. And that is it. I know it probably isn't really paranormal, but it was really creepy, and I figure /x/ is a good board to post it to.
Utah has a lot of weird alien occurrences.
Yeah, it does. I swear to Christ I've seen more than one UFO in my lifetime of living in the valley. I never mentioned it to anyone because the psych ward would have me BTFO. One time in particular I recall vividly as I was older then, 15 or 16. Camping with my scout troop. Some place we referred to as White Rock, though it probably wasn't really called that. Basically a small cliff in the middle of the desert. Fun to climb around on, and due to its distance from roads it made for a good shooting range area. This place is near Dugway, which was an old military base. No issues with the abandoned base while we were there during the day. Nighttime comes, we're telling stories around the fire. One of the leaders mentions what Dugway is and gives a bit of background. Other fake, obviously LARP stories about fleshgates are shared. My favorite leader gets serious and tells a story that was passed down from his dad, who used to work at a scout camp at the Utah-Wyoming border area. I'll post this one separately. Fire dies down and we all go to bed. I wake up at a god-forsaken hour to piss off the rock. Glance toward Dugway as I'm relieving myself. Some shitty LED lights are hovering about 500 feet above one of the smokestack-looking things. I think, oh, it must be some shitty security light to ward off teenage trespassers. It starts flitting around, darting faster than any spotlight could. No noise coming from it, so it's not a helicopter. It goes dark and I lose it. Run the fuck back to the tent. Pick related, it's Dugway Proving Grounds. Yeah, so that leader that told us about Dyatlov also told us this story that his dad told him about when he worked at a scout camp. I'll greentext it for your convenience, written in first person from the perspective of his dad. Working at scout camp near the Wyoming border of eastern Utah. I think I remember him saying it was Camp Tomahawk, but I don't remember for sure. Some stupid kid breaks his ankle because he fell down the mountain in the night while pissing. Being an unassigned counselor and a higher up of the camp, I'm assigned to drive this kid to the hospital with his leader to make sure they get there safely so the camp isn't liable. Pile into a shitty truck and take off. There's about an hour of dirt road driving between the camp and the interstate. Can't go more than 25 to 30 miles per hour because of bumps irritating the kid's ankle. We're just cruising, trying to stay awake and making light conversation while the kid sleeps. The last quarter or so of the dirt road passes by a Navajo res. Not sure why you'd build a scout camp by an Indian reservation, but whatever. Fucking Utah. On the side of the road is some random Native American wearing a wolf pelt or some shit. Pull over and ask him if he's hurt or needs a ride somewhere. No proper response, just some shitty grunting. I'm uncomfortable. MP4. Finally get him to drone out a haphazard, "I'm fine." Tell him to have a good night and stay safe. We drove away again. The interstate is about a quarter mile away. Finally we can actually drive reasonable speeds. The kid's leader randomly says something about the Native American jogging behind us. I laugh it off because we're going 25 miles per hour. He insists and looks scared, so I peep the rearview mirror and Jesus Christ. Sure enough, that raggedy-ass dude is jogging and keeping up about 5 feet behind the truck. I've had enough of this bullshit. Don't pull off to talk to him again. Make it onto a paved interstate road and kick it into high gear. I'm going over 60 miles per hour. I watch in the rearview as this fucker gets on all fours and starts sprinting like a damn dog. We're going freeway speeds. How is this possible? He starts to close the gap of 20 feet toward the truck. Fuck the speed limit, I'm not dealing with this. 100 miles per hour. He tries to keep up for a while but eventually falls back. We hear howls as we drive away. I'm not going back to that shit. Call my supervisor on landline and tell him I'm going to stay with the kid and leader at the hospital and just to send my stuff home with a coworker. Fucking Utah.
I grew up in the desert most of my life, South California and Utah. I've seen hundreds of UFOs, most of the stories are boring, never saw one up close, but saw stars start blinking and then shoot straight up into the sky, etc. The one story that's greentext worthy is me 2 years ago. Going on a backpacking trip in southern Utah, between Boulder and Escalante. Driving at like 2 a.m. with my buddy. We're tired as shit, so we pull over off the highway and set up our sleeping bags in the sand like 10 feet from the road. One of the few places in America you can still see the Milky Way. Friend is asleep, I'm on my back, staring up at the stars. Hear a mechanical vibrating noise. Look around, nothing near me, car is off, no cars on the highway, friend isn't snoring. Stare back up at the stars. Notice that if I stare at certain stars, the vibrations change. Certain stars are much louder than others. Feels like they're communicating with each other. I basically heard what I think were stars talking to each other. It was a really strange experience, because it happened for 2 or so hours straight. That area of the country is beautiful. Boulder, Utah is a super cool town, and the backpacking trail we took was gorgeous.
I'm from New York, but I went to Utah for the first time last year. Salt Lake City was creepy. I thought it would be like Red Dead Redemption, but instead it was homeless people, tweakers screeching in the sun, and rich Mormons smiling as they walked past all this. Really spooky was the amount of amputees among the homeless. I saw at least 4 different ones missing arms and legs. No idea what that was about. I asked about skinwalkers up in the north on the border with Wyoming, and no one knew what Skinwalker Ranch was, but people either told me not to talk about skinwalkers, or told me about people they know who have seen them, but no one actually saw one themselves. I stayed for one night in Payson in my girlfriend's grandparents' basement. She kept complaining that the basement fell off, but I didn't notice anything and started playing around with her until it led to me getting laid. Next day her dad asked us if we had any experiences in the basement. I thought he heard me with his daughter and got spooked, but he went on to say that the basement is a temporary tomb. In the basement was just a bed, bathroom, and a small box that we didn't open, but it had 2 urns containing the ashes of my GF's dead aunt and cousin. He said that when he slept in the basement he'd wake up and see indents in the bed as if someone was sitting on it, or he'd feel like he's being watched. So in Utah I slept with my GF in the temporary tomb that contained the ashes of her relatives underneath her father and grandparents and potentially the spirits of her relatives.
This story is one I posted on Reddit a while back before finding this board. It's about my own paranormal experience and trauma from it. TLDR demon attaches itself to me and tries hurting me any way it can. It all started when I was around 6 when I visited my grandma's house in Utah for the first time that I can remember. She owns a restaurant that has been in my family for 2 generations. This restaurant used to be a house built in the late 1800s to early 1900s, so it is well over 100 years old. There have been several deaths on the property as it used to be a home and accidents have happened. One, in particular, was Mr. Spargo, a banker who came every day after work for a drink and one day died from a heart attack on the property. Anyways, when I was little I had no idea about a lot of this history. The first time I heard about this story was when I was 9 or 10. The first time I was in the building nothing really happened, it seemed like nothing out of the ordinary to me. That changed when I was over there, an uneasy grandpa helping as best I could to set up that night's service. He had to leave and go get something from his house which is no more than 100 feet away, so I went exploring around the building. When I entered the then defunct bar the atmosphere changed. I felt that something was there and that it was pretending to be nice, but really it was the evilest thing I have ever felt and it gave me the scariest feeling I have ever had. The scariest thing to me is I felt that it knew I knew it was evil and was pissed it got found out. Whatever it was it went away even though I could still slightly feel it, so being the short attention span kid I ignored it and continued with helping my grandpa and left the bar. I would always come down to the restaurant after it closed and helped my grandpa turn off the lights, and whatever it was I felt that if I were to be alone for a second, as I was turning the lights off I would be dead. Later when I was 6.5 we went to visit my grandparents again, and later that week we were eating at the restaurant and I was trying to be careful with the silverware and cups as they were really nice and really old. Then I felt something pull my hair so hard my head got pulled back a little and I dropped the cup and it shattered not only itself but the plate as well, and everyone in the restaurant turned and looked at me. I remember thinking that maybe my hair got caught on the corner of the wall, and checked by moving my head around slowly and putting my head up against the corner to see if I could create the same result. Nothing happened. This event began what I will refer to as the 2 years of hell. When I came home I started having night terrors so bad that I would be screaming so loud and so long my parents would come running to see what was going on. It was not just 1 or 2, I would have at least 1 every week. I have no idea what I was screaming about as I would wake up and not remember what I was dreaming. This all culminated about 3 days from Christmas when it finally showed itself to me in the hallway of my house like a shadow figure with red eyes just standing there looking at me and making funny movements. I swear I can remember also hearing a flute as well, obviously creeped out. I kept trying to get my parents to come and see it and it would always disappear. Yes, I ran past it several times trying to do so and each time I got more uneasy. Finally, after my parents would not get up anymore I just went back to bed and watched it. The moment I turned around it jumped into my face and screamed at me. At this point, being a 6-year-old, it was more than I could handle and I covered my face and hid under the covers until I was asleep. It showed up for each day until Christmas and I would cover my ears and face each time to try and escape. Then on Christmas Day, I remember seeing something standing right behind my parents and then I pointed to it and when my parents looked back it disappeared. This happened for the next 2 Christmases in a row until I got saved and then it just disappeared. For the next 10 years of my life, I was scared I would always cover my eyes and ears every time I went to sleep. I had to have my curtains closed and door barricaded and had to be covered with at least 6 blankets. I finally, after 12 years, have gotten over it to some degree and am comfortable now at night, but whenever I am at my grandparents' restaurant, I always feel it watching me.
I have a reoccurring nightmare since before I was 8. I'm between 3 and 6 years old, not sure. The beginning of the dream is very abrupt and vivid. I'm at the bottom of these very steep, sharp, old stairs. It feels so real. I have had the dream enough times that I know what is going to happen. A man walks down the stairs toward me. I back up until I hit a wall. I can't go anywhere. I turn around and flatten against the wall. He starts to strike me with something long and stingy. Maybe a leather whip? I can't turn around to look. I feel paralyzed by fear. And this is why the dream sucks. Because I feel it. I know I'm asleep, but I can't wake up. I feel like I'm sleepy in my dreams sometimes and can't wake up, from like a dream inside of a dream. But the pain is usually bad enough that I finally wake up, covered in sweat, my heart racing. Then I can feel my skin where I was hit in the dream. It becomes swollen and red in stripes. One time this happened when I was sleeping with a boyfriend and he saw it too. I went to bed unmarked. I don't know what the physiology of this is, but my nightmares cause physical reactions that cause inflammation that cause real pain and injury. This dream usually only happens once or twice a year, in the springtime. I get sleep paralysis more often, a couple times a month, but that's another story. I don't remember being abused IRL as a kid, but I had these nightmares as a kid, so the memories are confusing. My grandma was some sort of extremist Mormon and she died when I was 8 and I'm never older than 8 in my nightmares. Also, my grandma was emotionally abusive. Grew up in Utah. I really feel like the staircase is a real place. I can't ever forget how tall each stair was. They were warped and I never forget it. The nightmares suck because even though I know it's not real and I'm safe, it hurts really bad and there is no escaping that for a few minutes. The pain is so intense and searing.
I was going to post this yesterday, but I had a little bit of hesitation in doing so, because I was afraid of him showing himself again. But I want to share my story. Move to Utah after 4th grade. House we bought used to be owned by a priest, did not know this at the time. Front room has a built-in display, with cabinets on the bottom, and mirror stands on the top. Back part was also mirror. First year living there, I start to see something very similar to the hooded man in Pick. He only shows himself on top of the staircase. Usually only in reflections when looking into mirror display, which is adjacent to steps. He also begins to show himself at the top of the basement steps while I am playing Vidya. Year 2 to 3, he becomes more malevolent. I start having recurring nightmares. One of two. First nightmare, I see myself in third person sleeping, Shadowman is choking me. Cannot wake up from dream till last second. Second nightmare, man kills my mother and chases me. Very loud noise every dream. I try to reach a phone or safety, wake up as man kill me. Man continues to manifest himself more out in the open to me. One of the last years we lived in Utah, he manifested himself to me outside in our backyard. Broad daylight, I am alone. Nope. Run to my room with all 3 dogs, lock room, call friend to please come over. I heard noises all of the time in that house as well as conversations carrying on. That was all of my story, or so I thought. A couple weeks ago, I go on a ghost tour with my mother. We are sharing stories, and I tell mine. Look of shock on my mother's face. Tells me she had the same nightmares of the exact same shadow man, dressed in the same things I saw it in, choking her. Tells me of how many times my oldest dog would stand at the bottom of the staircase and bark at nothing. Tells me that priest used to own the house. I read into some articles online, and apparently spirits are naturally drawn to religious figures/persons. Or perhaps that demons/malevolent spirits are drawn to places owned by holy warriors. The area of Utah I lived in is also an area known to be heavy religious burial grounds for Indians that the Mormons built over. I wish my mother would have told me all of this. I always stayed in that place alone, and at one point wouldn't leave my couch with my dogs until someone else got home. I want to call the new owners to see if anything strange happens to them, but I don't want to risk that spirit/demon finding me.
Utah, eastern Idaho. The Morridor is filled with crazy shit, you just have to look. As for me, I'm not going to relate one of my stories, but my best friend's grandparents. See, they own a ton of land around Eber, which is east of Salt Lake City. Basically a farm town. After the war, his grandpa came back from the Pacific and was a sheep herder and farmer. Over the years he had a lot of strange shit happen, when they would take the sheep onto public land to graze. Sheep were born with 2 heads, missing back legs, had no spine. He would commonly find dead sheep, drained of their blood and missing eyes and genitals. That really took off in the late 60s and still happened in the 90s before he retired. But the thing that scared his grandpa the most was what I can only assume was a skinwalker. He would pull his trailer onto public land in the summer, and every other week he would switch off with his hired hand to keep an eye on the livestock. One night he notices a pair of glowing, red eyes that reminded him of a mountain lion, and it was slowly stalking up towards where the sheep were huddled. Needless to say, the sheep panicked, bleating for help as loudly as they could. He grabbed the .30.06 and fired a warning shot. The thing kept coming. He fired again, this time aiming in between the eyes. The thing let out a twisted, almost human scream and took off. This went on for the rest of the week. He would take the gun out with him and sit in a chair next the fire, sheep huddled around him. Each time he would shoot it, and it would take off. However, one time it finally came in close, without him noticing. He said it was because he had built the fire too big and the light pollution stopped him from seeing it stalking in. A snapping twig is what alerted him, 10 feet to his left. In a panic, he fired while he reached behind him and grabbed a burning log and chucked it at the thing. He said it was the mangiest, sorriest animal he had ever seen. About 6 feet tall at the shoulder, covered in mangy hair. He said the closest thing he could compare it to was a skinny mangy bear standing on its back legs. Its skin was bubbling from where the log hit it, and it was pissed. The sheep were in a panic, bleating and huddled next to the trailer. He fired another shot, this time aiming for the center of the mass. He saw it stumble, and it took off shambling in a weird loping sorta motion. He took off after it, pumping as many shots as he could. This thing was bleeding badly, so it was easy to track it with a flashlight. About a mile from camp, he decided this thing wasn't worth it anymore. At this point he could hear its painful cries filling the woods. Again he said it sounded oddly human. After this incident, he said he saw it one more time, the next summer. He raised the rifle again and this thing took off. It probably learned its lesson and rightfully left this guy alone. I heard this story about 6 years ago, when I was barely 19. We were staying at his grandparents' house since the area around Eber is great for elk hunting, and we were going to scout around to see what was available that coming season. I got lucky, because he died the following year. And let me tell you, when a WW2 vet, who's 80-something years old and radiates the honor he lived his life with, tells you something while taking drags on a cigarette, shaking as he relates an incident 40 years old that still scares him, you tend to believe him. Little bonus tidbit. The land that he owns and the public land was in a 20-mile radius of Skinwalker Ranch.
First story. I have this friend I worked with. One night after we got off our shifts, we went to this structure across the street from Caille. It's connected to the little river there, and might have been a generator at some point. I'm not sure. Anyway, my buddy wants to go in. The place has one camera, but it apparently isn't equipped with night vision. We get to the river, and I decided to stay behind the water was ice-cold mountain runoff. Friend goes in for a while, and I'm just standing in the dark waiting. After about 5 to 10 minutes, he comes out, absolutely booking it. He's yelling about how there's someone in the building. So we got out of there pretty fast. He's an army dude who's done tours before, so it was a little jarring to see him freaked out like that. Second story. I went up Little Cottonwood Canyon with this same guy. We went to that trail with all the massive granite boulders, and climbed on top of one of them to watch the stars. After about 20 to 30 minutes, we started hearing weird barking noises. I thought it was dogs at first, but the bark was wrong. So of course, because I spend too much time here, I then thought it might have been something supernatural. Maybe a Wendigo, since it sounded kind of human. It gets closer, so my buddy and I climb down the rock and start making our way back to his car. We're kind of worried about using the flashlight at this point, so we kept it off. As we get closer to his car, the noises get closer. Shit's following us. I jokingly suggested he throw a rock at the sounds, and he does it. It isn't yapping anymore, it's screaming and weird human-ish growling. We got in the car. On the drive home, we decided it had to have been some coyotes.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.